Emily Carter had everything a woman could want: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and the quiet admiration of an entire town. In Maplewood, she and Daniel were the perfect couple, the ones people pointed to as proof that happiness still existed. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks. Behind the glowing windows of their white house on Willow Lane, secrets were festering, lies whispered over late-night phone calls, perfume that wasn't hers, and a love that had begun to rot. By the time the truth surfaced, Maplewood would no longer be the peaceful town it once was. Someone would be dead, and the perfect marriage everyone envied would become the darkest story it had ever known. In the quiet town of Maplewood, life moved at a gentle pace. People trusted their neighbors. Doors were left unlocked, and gossip rarely extended beyond the usual small-town chatter. Among its residents, Emily Carter stood out as the kind of woman everyone admired. She ran a cozy flower shop on Main Street called Bloom and Vine, known for its bright arrangements and Emily's warm smile. She was polite, dependable, and always seemed genuinely happy. Her husband, Daniel Carter, was equally respected. As an architect, he had designed several of the town's modern homes, earning a reputation for his creativity and integrity. Together, they were the picture of success: beautiful, kind, and seemingly in love. Every morning, Daniel kissed Emily goodbye before leaving for work, his car disappearing down the same winding road. Every evening, Emily waited for him, often preparing his favorite meal or planning a quiet dinner on the patio. To anyone who looked from the outside, their marriage appeared perfect, the kind people dreamed about but rarely achieved. Their house at the end of Willow Lane was always filled with laughter, candles glowing through the windows and the smell of fresh flowers drifting through the air. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks. It began subtly, so quietly that Emily barely noticed. Daniel started working late more often, returning home tired and distracted. When she asked about his long hours, he always had a reasonable answer: deadlines, new clients, or unexpected design problems. He spoke with such confidence that Emily never doubted him. She trusted him completely, believing that their love was strong enough to withstand anything. Still, something inside her began to shift. She started noticing the small details that didn't quite fit. The faint scent of a woman's perfume on his jacket, unfamiliar numbers flashing across his phone, hotel receipts tucked inside his briefcase. Each time she found an excuse. Maybe he brushed against someone at work. Maybe the number belonged to a client. Maybe she was overthinking. Emily had built her entire world around Daniel, and the thought of him lying was too painful to face. Meanwhile, Daniel's behavior grew more unpredictable. He became distant, lost in thought during dinner, sometimes staring blankly as Emily spoke. He'd snap out of it quickly, forcing a smile and saying everything was fine. But it wasn't. When he wasn't home, his phone was off and off. When he was home, he seemed like a stranger, polite but detached. The warmth between them was fading, replaced by an uneasy silence neither of them wanted to acknowledge. The townspeople didn't see the change. To them, the Carters remained the perfect couple, hosting dinner parties, attending church on Sundays, and posing for photos at local charity events. Emily continued arranging flowers for weddings, pretending everything was normal. Yet late at night, she'd sit alone in the darkened living room, wondering where her husband really was. Daniel, on the other hand, was fighting his own battle. He loved the life he had built, but he was drowning in his own lies. He told himself he could handle it, that he could keep both worlds separate without hurting anyone. But secrets have a way of catching up. The more he tried to hide, the deeper he sank. The guilt was eating away at him, yet he couldn't stop. The thrill of his double life was intoxicating, and before long it consumed him completely. Emily sensed that something irreversible was coming. She just didn't know what. To her, it felt like standing on thin ice, smiling for the world while feeling the cracks beneath her feet. She didn't realize that the man she loved was already slipping away, or that the choices he was making in the shadows would soon destroy them both. Maplewood was peaceful on the surface, but behind one beautiful white house on Willow Lane, a storm was quietly forming. 2 towns away in the bustling city of Riverview, a woman named Claire Dawson was beginning a new chapter of her life. She was confident, independent, and used to getting what she wanted. Working as an interior designer, she had recently been hired to collaborate on a renovation project for a small architectural firm. That was where she met Daniel Carter. To Claire, he was everything she admired in a man: intelligent, well-spoken, and effortlessly charming. He carried himself with quiet confidence, and when he talked about his work, his passion lit up the room. What Claire didn't know was that behind his easy smile was a man hiding an entire life from her. Their connection started professionally, built on late-night meetings and shared ideas. They spent hours discussing designs, colors, and layouts, but the conversation often drifted to more personal topics. Daniel told her he lived alone, claimed his work left little time for a social life, and hinted at being unlucky in love. Claire found herself drawn to his honesty, or what she believed was honesty. He listened to her stories with genuine interest, laughed at her jokes, and seemed to understand her better than anyone ever had. Soon their relationship crossed the line between work and romance. What began as a friendship turned into something deeper. Daniel started spending weekends in Riverview, telling Emily he was traveling for business. He brought Claire flowers, took her to quiet restaurants, and painted a picture of a man searching for happiness after years of loneliness. Claire fell completely under his spell. She believed she had finally found someone who saw her for who she truly was. For Daniel, the affair was thrilling. It was a world free from responsibility. No expectations, no routines, no reminders of the life he had back in Maplewood. With Claire, he could reinvent himself, escape the guilt he carried, and forget about the woman waiting for him at home. He promised himself he would stop before it went too far, but each time he tried, he found himself drawn back to her. The danger of it all only made it more intoxicating. As months passed, the relationship deepened. Daniel began to spend less time with Emily, claiming an increase in work demands. Claire, however, started to notice inconsistencies. Sometimes Daniel seemed distracted, distant even, as if his mind was somewhere else. When she asked about his family, he avoided the question. He rarely answered calls after 9 p.m., and whenever she suggested visiting his home, he changed the subject. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Claire stumbled upon a tagged photo that froze her in place. It started with a single message: short, anonymous, and impossible to ignore. Emily found it in her shop one morning, slipped between the petals of a bouquet delivered without a return address. The note read only a few words: "He's not who you think he is." At first, she thought it was a cruel prank, maybe from a jealous competitor or a stranger with too much time. But over the next few weeks, more messages appeared. Some were left at her door, others mailed to her workplace. Each one hinted that Daniel was hiding something. A double life, another woman, lies that went deeper than she could imagine. Emily tried to dismiss them. She told herself that people sometimes targeted happy couples out of envy, but doubt is like a slow poison, and once it enters the mind, it spreads quietly. She began watching Daniel more closely. His texts, his phone calls, the way he avoided eye contact when she asked about work. He grew more impatient, brushing off her questions, insisting she was imagining things. Still, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was terribly wrong. The truth came out one evening in the most ordinary way. Daniel had gone to take a shower and his phone, forgotten on the couch, buzzed with a notification. Emily never went through his things before, but this time something compelled her to look. The message was from a woman named Claire, filled with affection and longing. Scrolling further, she saw months of messages, plans, confessions, and photos that shattered everything she believed about her marriage. The man she thought she knew had been living a lie, building a secret world behind her back. When Daniel came out of the bathroom, Emily was waiting for him, trembling with rage and heartbreak. The confrontation that followed tore through their home like a storm. There were no calm explanations, no apologies that could undo the betrayal. Emily demanded to know who Claire was, and Daniel tried to explain, but his excuses sounded hollow. He claimed it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. He swore he would end it immediately, that he still loved Emily, that he could fix what he had broken. For days afterward, the house felt like a battlefield gone silent. Daniel tried to make amends, cooking dinner, leaving flowers, sending messages from work. Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to rebuild the life they once had, but every look, every word felt different now. Trust once shattered is not easily repaired, and somewhere beyond their quiet town, Claire was growing desperate. After Daniel stopped answering her calls, Claire's confusion turned to fury. She couldn't understand why the man who had once promised her everything had suddenly disappeared. She began sending messages to him, demanding answers, then to Emily, once again pretending to be an anonymous friend. Her obsession grew with every unanswered text. Soon she was driving past the Carter's house late at night, watching from her car as the lights went out. She convinced herself that Emily was the obstacle keeping her from the life she deserved. Daniel tried to cut all contact with Claire, but it was too late. She had no intention of letting go. When her messages turned threatening, Daniel considered telling the police but feared exposure, the shame, the gossip, the ruin of his reputation. So he kept quiet, hoping the problem would fade on its own, but it didn't. Claire began sending letters to his office, slipping notes under his windshield, reminding him that secrets don't stay buried forever. Emily, unaware of the full danger, believed the worst was over. She thought the hardest part had passed, that the affair was done, that Daniel was finally being honest. She wanted to forgive him, to move forward. She didn't realize that the other woman wasn't finished yet. What began as betrayal was turning into something far darker. The cracks that had once been invisible were now gaping wounds. And as the days went by, Maplewood's picture-perfect couple was unknowingly marching toward a night that would destroy everything they had left. The night the quiet town of Maplewood lost its peace began like any other. The streets were still, the air sharp with the chill of November, and faint lights glowed behind curtained windows. Inside the Carter home, Emily moved through the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. Daniel had been unusually restless all week. He barely touched his food, pacing the living room, checking his phone again and again. He told Emily he was waiting for an important client call, but his face betrayed unease. He looked like a man expecting something, or someone, to arrive. At 9:43 p.m., the neighbors later reported hearing raised voices. Then came the sound of glass shattering, followed by a scream that made a dog down the street start barking. No one called the police immediately. In Maplewood, people assumed arguments were private matters. But by 10:15, another sound echoed from the Carter home. A thud followed by silence. When police arrived half an hour later, the scene inside told a story of chaos and violence. Daniel Carter lay in the kitchen, his body sprawled across the tiled floor, blood pooling beneath him. The knife used to end his life rested only a few feet away. Emily sat nearby, trembling, her hands and clothes stained crimson. Her eyes were wide but empty, fixed on the body of the man she had loved. Officers quickly noticed strange inconsistencies. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that whoever entered had either been let in or already had access to the house. A chair was overturned and shards of a broken wine glass glittered across the floor. The faint scent of perfume lingered in the air, not Emily's familiar floral scent, but something heavier and unfamiliar. As paramedics confirmed Daniel's death, police began questioning Emily. Her story was hesitant, disjointed. She claimed she had heard a noise from the back of the house and found Daniel arguing with someone. When she rushed in, chaos erupted. She said she tried to help, but by the time she reached him, he was already bleeding. She insisted she didn't see who it was, though her voice wavered as she spoke. The officers noticed a single earring on the floor near the back door, small, gold, and shaped like a teardrop. Emily denied it was hers. When investigators collected evidence, they also found faint footprints near the mudroom, too small to belong to Daniel. There was no question that another person had been there that night. The news spread through Maplewood by morning. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in disbelief. The Carters were supposed to be perfect, the couple who smiled through everything. Now their home was sealed with police tape, the place of a gruesome crime that no one could understand. Emily was taken in for questioning. The detectives pressed her for details, but her memory seemed fractured. She repeated the same fragmented story. Daniel had been in the kitchen, there was shouting, and then blood. They asked about the earring, about Daniel's supposed affair, and about any recent threats. At first she denied everything, but when faced with the messages found on Daniel's phone, her composure began to crack. Meanwhile, another lead emerged from a gas station camera 2 miles away. Footage from that night showed a dark-colored sedan pulling into the road that led to Willow Lane, just after 9 p.m. The car belonged to Claire Dawson. When detectives visited her apartment the next morning, she wasn't there. But inside, they found evidence that made their suspicions impossible to ignore. Gloves stained with blood, a folder containing photos of Daniel and Emily, and dozens of handwritten letters addressed to Daniel, some affectionate, others furious. When they finally located Claire at a motel outside Riverview, she appeared calm, even detached. She told investigators she had gone to Maplewood that night to talk things through, but claimed she left before anything happened. She denied hurting anyone, insisting she just wanted closure, yet the evidence painted a different picture, one of obsession, betrayal, and rage. By the end of that week, both women's lives were under a microscope. Emily, the grieving wife, was now a suspect. Claire, the other woman, was being called a murderer. The public saw it as a simple story, a love triangle gone deadly. But detectives sensed there was more beneath the surface. Too many details didn't add up, and too many lies had already been told. The truth, they would soon discover, was far more tangled than anyone imagined. The night Daniel Carter died was not the result of one person's rage, but the collision of 3 lives built on deceit, and only one of those lives would emerge from the darkness with the full story left to tell. The investigation into Daniel Carter's murder gripped the town for months. Maplewood, once quiet and content, became a place of whispers and speculation. Everyone had an opinion. Some believed Emily had finally snapped after learning about the affair. Others thought Claire had gone mad with jealousy. But as detectives pieced together the evidence, they began to realize that the truth didn't fit neatly into either version. What had happened that night wasn't a crime of passion committed by one woman. It was a collision of betrayal, fear, and blind desperation. Forensic results provided the first clue that something was off. Daniel's blood covered most of the kitchen, but traces of Emily's were mixed with it. She had a deep cut on her arm that she couldn't explain clearly, claiming she might have injured herself while trying to help him, yet investigators weren't convinced. The knife found at the scene had both her fingerprints and Claire's, which suggested they had both handled it at different times. There was no forced entry, meaning someone had been invited in. Slowly, a more complex picture began to form, one that neither woman wanted to admit. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered that the night of the murder, Emily had texted Claire using Daniel's phone. She had found the number in his messages days earlier, and instead of deleting it, she had decided to use it. Posing as Daniel, she invited Claire to the house, claiming he wanted to talk and end things properly. The decision came from a place of anger and pain, but also from a desperate need for closure. Emily wanted to confront the woman who had stolen her husband's affection, to make her see the damage she had caused. Claire, still consumed by obsession, drove to Maplewood believing Daniel wanted to reconcile. When she arrived, the house was dimly lit and Emily was waiting. What started as a confrontation turned into chaos. Words turned to shouts, shouts to threats, and somewhere in the blur, Claire pulled a knife from her purse. Whether she brought it for protection or revenge, no one could say for sure. The two women struggled, each accusing the other of ruining everything. When Daniel arrived in the middle of it, he tried to separate them, but in the confusion the knife found its mark. Daniel fell, bleeding heavily, while the two women froze in shock. Panic set in immediately. Claire dropped the weapon and fled through the back door, leaving behind her earring and muddy footprints. Emily called for help, but by the time she did, Daniel was already gone. Her screams echoed down Willow Lane, drawing the attention of neighbors who would later recount the haunting sound of a woman breaking apart. In court, both women told different versions of the story. Claire claimed Emily had attacked first, driven by rage and humiliation. Emily insisted that Claire had come armed and out of control. The physical evidence pointed to both of them, leaving the jury to untangle a web of deceit. After weeks of testimony, the verdict finally came. Emily was convicted of manslaughter for her role in luring Claire to the house and failing to prevent the deadly struggle. Claire was sentenced for assault and conspiracy, after her fingerprints were matched to the weapon and the threatening letters. When the trial ended, Maplewood tried to move on, but the story lingered like a shadow. The house on Willow Lane was eventually sold, its cheerful white paint unable to hide the memory of what happened there. People who walked past at night swore they could still feel the chill of something unfinished, a presence that refused to fade. In the end, there were no real winners. Daniel was dead, Emily's life destroyed, and Claire's obsession had cost her everything. The town that once saw the Carters as perfect now remembered them as a tragic warning, and that behind the most beautiful smiles can hide the darkest secrets. The story of the Carters and Claire Dawson became Maplewood's cautionary tale, told in whispers and late-night conversations. It reminded everyone that love can twist into something dangerous when mixed with lies and pride. What began as a marriage built on trust ended as a nightmare born from deceit, and the scars it left behind would never fully heal.